tell you another story, an ancient story, but this is a true story from about 500 years ago in pre-Columbian Incas. The Incas, in their religion, had a ceremony where they would take children and they would take them up to the mountains and they would drug them so they'd feel a little less pain, and then they'd kill them as a sacrifice to their gods. That was part of their culture, part of their religious heritage. But that was 500 years ago. I want you to compare what happened 500 years ago to what happened in this century in the United States, in the state of Tennessee. There was a girl named Jessica Crank. Jessica Crank was 15 years old. Jessica Crank had a tumor that started to grow on Jessica's shoulder. It was a tumor that was completely treatable with modern medical science, but her mother didn't believe in modern medical science. Her mother believed in the Epistle of James and pointed to that for the treatment and health of her child. Well, whatever the Epistle of James, the tumor continued to grow and grow until it was the size, literally, of a basketball on this girl's shoulder. She was in incredible pain for an extended period of time, and then Jessica Crank died. Now, in Tennessee, you see, they have a law that the politicians in Tennessee passed under the pressure from religious lobbying that says that there's what they call a faith healing exemption to law. Because if anybody here in this room were to neglect their child in such a way, they'd have that child removed from the home, they'd later be prosecuted. But there are religious exemptions in the child protective laws in the state of Tennessee that relate to so-called faith healing. But that's the problem. If it were faith healing, I would be for it. It's faith killing and faith torturing. That's what this type of situation is, and that's what we're seeing in this country today, and it's really reprehensible. And it's more widespread than you might think. Some of us associate this with the Christian Science denomination. They did a pediatric study of the Faith Assembly denomination, also a faith healing denomination. They did a study of newborns. We're talking 0 to 6 months old, very little ones. And they studied those infants, and they compared them to typical infants where the parents use modern medical science. There was a 270% higher infant mortality rate among the children in the Faith Assembly congregation. And many of these deaths with the little ones go unreported. We don't even know how many children die in these type of situations. Remember Senator Grassley this summer from Iowa talking about, the death panels. Remember, we had to be afraid of the death panels. This is a real death panel. It's a death panel of 1 or 2 people that decide whether another human being, a child, but I think it's still a human being, lives or dies. That's a death panel, a real death panel. Representative Stupak talks about right to life, says he's strong right to life. All right. Where was Representative Stupak for Jessica Crank? Where was he for the many other children? Does right to life include people who are actually born? Are they people who deserve a right to life? And where are we? Where are we in this room? Have we been speaking out as much as we should? Have we been fighting as much as we should on behalf of children, on behalf of vulnerable people when there's religious privileging? I say that we've not done enough, and that we need to work together to do even more. I want to give you a third area of religiously based child abuse that's more commonly discussed. And some of you may be familiar with Father Paul Shanley. Father Shanley is from my area, New England, and he was a pedophile. Now, I went to the University of Notre Dame. I went to school in Ireland. I knew priests and friends with priests. I don't think it's fair to connect priests only with pedophilia. That, it's too much stereotyping. However, here's the institutional problem that I think is a valid public policy question for us, is that Father Shanley was attending the Man-Boy Love Association meetings. He was attending their meetings. That's one thing. I would say not a good thing, just me. But his boss, Bishop Daly, knew that Father Shanley was attending these meetings and was shifting Father Shanley from Parish A to Parish B to Parish C without warning the parents and the families of the danger that the bishop was placing those children in. Think about that. How can you have that policy? In fact, it goes beyond that. And I can tell you as an attorney, they have an assertion that they bring forth, a First Amendment assertion. They say it's part of their free expression clause right under the First Amendment to keep secret their internal decision-making about employees, where they shift them when these employees are alleged to have engaged in child sexual abuse. Now, like I said, I started a children's museum. Our employees had a lot of contact with children. Luckily for us, nothing untoward ever happened. But had we ever been sued, there would have been discovery, we would have had to provide information. Of course, that would be the right thing to do. We would never object to providing information in that kind of situation, but not the Catholic Church. They say it all has to be kept secret, and they say it's their First Amendment right, and they aggressively assert this. Simultaneous with that, and this is what strikes me, simultaneous with saying that, back in May, this year, during this election, of all the issues you could choose, moral issues that you could choose Darfur, you could choose helping low-income children in the United States. There are a lot of moral issues that you could choose. The one issue they chose to pass out flyers for at the Catholic Church in my hometown was against gay marriage in the state of Maine. So keeping secret pedophiles, shifting from parish A to parish B to parish C, yes, and opposing gay marriage at the same time. In Washington, D.C., where I work right now, in Washington, D.C., the Catholic Church literally said that they may discontinue their charitable activities in the city because the city might pass some kind of gay marriage or gay equal rights law. How can people say that? I don't have any prejudice against people. I like a lot of religious people. I don't have any personal prejudice against anyone who's religious, but how can somebody say these things and use the word morality in connection to them? It really raises serious questions. And none of them are constitutional, by the way. Because you'll always hear people on the other side of these questions, whether it's the child care, the so-called faith healing, or this issue, oh, say, well, it's First Amendment, constitutional right, freedom of religion. No, not even under the Justice Roberts Court, at least not yet. There's no such right. And in 1943, the Supreme Court ruled in Prince versus Massachusetts that there's no right to place a child in, quote, a situation of ill health or death for religious purposes. You know who did it? I'll tell you who did it. Nothing about the Constitution. It's politicians. Politicians got pressured by religious lobbying, successfully pressured, and that's where we have these type of situations. John Witt of the Center for the Study of Separation of Church and State at Emory University says that the separation of church and state is no longer the law of the land in the United States of America today. The religious right is always out there warning us, right? Now, how often do you hear the warnings? Special rights. Watch out for special rights, usually referring to gay people. Well, you know what I think of special rights? Elevating one class of people over another class of people and giving them privileges based on religion. That is special rights. That is immoral, and we need to act to do something about it. That's what we're about. And so for us, this is an issue that goes to our heart. And for me, it goes to my heart. And it makes it even more so because of what I felt when I was young. When I was a kid in high school, I tried out for the play Inherit the Wind. Anybody remember that one? About the Scopes Monkey trials. And I studied, I worked hard, whatever. And I got the part, I got the lead. I got to play the Clarence Darrow part. That'll affect your worldview when you memorize the lines of Clarence Darrow in the Scopes Monkey trials. Trust me. But what's interesting to me now about the play Inherit the Wind, if you think about it, is that it was written in the 1950s, and it was looking back on the Scopes trial in the 1920s, and it was looking back, the whole tone of the play is that it was looking back and saying, oh, remember those old days back there in the Scopes Monkey trials. We're moving on. We're moving on to the uplands of separation of church and state. We're moving on to a better world where rationalism is what's going to hold sway. And it really makes you stop and wonder what the heck happened to America in these recent decades that changed that so much. And part of it has to do with church power. Now, don't get me wrong. I know and you know that churches had tremendous power in the mid-20th century America, no doubt about it. You know, but it was a different situation in kind. There was the church, very powerful, and they had, you know, the soup kitchen connected to the church, and there was definitely a lot to contend with. in dealing with theology in this country in the last century, but something's changed. And I think it has to do with the megachurches, the big box churches, and the rise of fundamentalism. And that they're different in nature, they're different in kind. They're sort of become a situation where now you'll see frequently with these big box churches that they actually own enterprises. You know, the ice cream parlor. I'm not making up that example. The fitness center. The broadcasting facility, very well funded. And a huge multi-million-dollar funded lobbying effort. It's really changed the nature of what a church is, and it's become something like an unregulated business universe, separate and unto itself. It's their affirmative action. You know, when I listen to right-wing talk radio, they'll use the term affirmative action pejoratively, and they'll say, well, you know, that's a bad thing. That's special rights, that affirmative action. And Secular Coalition for America, we don't take a position on affirmative action. But I think, regardless of your own opinion about it, with regard to African Americans, the centuries of slavery, then the many decades of denial of civil rights, you'd have to say at least there's an argument for affirmative action. But we're going to have special rights for the Billy Grahams of the world. Billy Graham, who they just released the Nixon tapes, and Billy Graham referred to the synagogues of Satan. Billy Graham, the guy who said during the height of the Vietnam War that Jesus came to bring fire upon the earth. Bombs was what I think he was getting at. He said to bring fire upon the earth. That was his Vietnam policy, I guess. That Billy Graham and his huge organization, they get special rights in American society today? Yes, they do. Rick Warren. Rick Warren, remember him from the inauguration? Rick Warren, who compared Terry Schiavo's husband to a Nazi. That Rick Warren. The Rick Warren who, last I checked, is a minister, and who, after all the charity he brags about, after that is worth something approaching $11 million. That Rick Warren, he and his vast organization, they get special rights in America today? Yes. Yes, they do. And of course, Ted Haggard. Ted Haggard. Remember Ted Haggard because he was lecturing us against gay sex while having gay sex on meth? That Ted Haggard? That Ted Haggard, I think the sex kind of overshadowed something else, though. And that is that this guy was in control of a vast organization with huge amounts of money and power affecting American politics and society. And Ted's little scandal moved him to the sidelines, but his organization is still there and still hugely powerful. And sometimes I think the power is so incredibly big that we don't even notice it even among the non-theist community. We start to say, well, what is this about? But we don't notice how pervasive it is. I mean, think about an organization, even in the most liberal of jurisdictions, even in a state that has strong anti-discrimination laws, think of an organization that can say right now, you are a Jew, you are fired. They can say that. They can say that even in states with anti-discrimination laws. They can say, you are gay, you are fired. They can say, you are agnostic like Einstein, you are fired. You're atheist like Mark Twain, you are fired. That's some big power that we have granted these religious entities, these mega Walmart churches.